So we are up to our second mindful mantra. Peace is not resisting. And while last week's mantra was only focused in the future, the peace is not chasing. It can only happen, this imagining us in the future being happy. Resisting has no time boundaries. We can resist in the past, regretting what happened, wishing we could change what happened. We can be resisting in the present moment, some inconvenience, some discomfort, something going on we're not liking. And we can also be resisting in the future by imagining something happening in the future that we don't want to be happening, to be pushing back on it. And while we talked about resisting already, we did talk about it in the first class when we talked about stress, and we talked about it in the second class when we talked about the mind-wandering network and mindfulness. And inadvertently, we kind of talked about it last week in that while chasing is the exact polar opposite of resisting, they are in fact two sides of the same coin. That if I am chasing something, I'm wanting something in the future, I'm desiring something, I am implying that I don't want what I have now. I am resisting what I don't have. And if I am resisting what I imagine is going to happen or what already did happen, I am implying that I want something else to have happened instead. And yet, they are also clear. Most of the time, they have their own clear mind movement. There is something that is the object of our desire, and what we're implying we're resisting doesn't really have a name. Or something can be the object of our repulsion, of our resisting, and yet that desiring doesn't really have a name. So we can identify which mind movement it is, and that's helpful for us because like we were trying to dial back a belief last week when we were looking at chasing, this idea that if I could just get over there, if I could just get this next thing, if I could get this next experience, this next recognition, this next bonus, whatever this thing is, if I could just get it, I'll be eternally happy. And as we saw, that is bullshit. Because not only do we not get happiness when we chase it, we get unhappiness. We get disappointment and frustration and irritation. We get the exact opposite, but it's a belief that we're unraveling, and that's why we went through peace is not chasing and understanding what's happening, and really understanding it through the motivation reward pathway. We are doing the same thing this week with resisting. We are pulling apart a belief that if I just don't get what I don't want, then I'll be happy. Or the other side of that, if I get what I don't want, then I have to be unhappy. And it is that belief that propels the thoughts, because this is how we resist, it's how we chase in our thoughts. It's that belief that propels the thought habits, that initiates and engages the stress response, really keeping us in this cycle of suffering, of resisting. And it's why we have the mantras, because the mantras are the exact opposite of the beliefs that we are holding that are causing us so much unhappiness. And the mantras are saying something that's true. And because we repeat these mantras over and over and over again in our meditation, sometimes saying it 60, 70 times, we are more likely to catch ourselves when we are in the act. We're more mindful of what mind movement is happening. And if we know what's happening, then we know what we can do. We know where the problem is. But if we don't know what the problem is, we can't solve it. So when we find ourselves in a situation where we're in a long line at the grocery store, and we're irritated because I shouldn't have to be in this long line. That person's taking too long up there. They're going too slowly. Oh my God, they're using coupons. Or we're counting all the people. Oh my God, there's too many people in this line. Conveniently not counting ourselves, being the inconvenience in this line. And in that frustration and that irritation and that resisting, that story that we're telling ourselves, pushing back on what's happening, we hear a little whisper. Peace is not resisting. Oh yeah. And we start to bring our attention to what's going on, and we look at the thoughts that we're having, that we're resisting. And we remember, peace is not resisting. Maybe in that moment we start to say the mantra a couple of times, and we're breathing as we're saying it. And as we're saying the mantra, we're no longer fueling the story that is the resisting. So we're starting to relax. The stress response is starting to unwind. Maybe we're looking around. We're starting to remember where we are. Hear the sounds around us to ground ourselves back into the present moment. And then we're like, oh my God, peace is not resisting. I can be in this long line. I don't have to be miserable. It's the resisting mind that was causing the problem. It's not the situation. It's what we are telling ourselves that's the problem. That when we imagine we have to go to something, we have to go to some event in the evening, and maybe it's a or a work event, something we have to go to it, but we don't want to go to it. And we're all afternoon, we're telling ourselves all the reasons that we don't want to go. And oh my God, it's going to be so late, it's going to be so annoying, and I don't want to do this, and I don't know what to wear, and all of these things that we're just going on and on resisting the event. And then all of a sudden that little thought just pops in our head because we've said the mantra so many times. And we go, oh yeah, peace is not resisting. What am I doing right now? It's not even happening, right? The event's not for 4 more hours. And here I am pushing back on it, making myself unhappy right now. And we can say the mantra again, and we can breathe, and we can come back into the present moment and see that evidence. Oh yeah, peace is not resisting. It's still out there in the evening. I've got to go to it later, but I'm no longer resisting it. So I'm no longer unhappy. And when we're going into the past, regretting the past, resisting some choice, some decision that we made, or something someone did to us, pushing back on it. It shouldn't have happened. They shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have done this. All of the ways that we resist. And again, that thought just arises. Peace is not resisting. We've said it so many times. And again, we can look at it and say, it already happened. It's not that it's going to happen. It's not that it is happening. It's already happened. It's not happening. I'm keeping this alive in my thoughts by resisting it. And I'm making myself miserable. And again, we say the mantra and we breathe and we ground ourselves back into the present moment. Using our sight, using our sound, our sense of smell, if you're eating, tasting. To use our senses to ground ourselves back and go, oh yeah, a moment ago I was resisting something that happened a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. I was resisting. And that's what was the source of my suffering, not what happened to me. That already happened. It's that I'm resisting it. And in our resisting mindset, in these thoughts, we have this belief that somehow we're solving a problem. That if I keep thinking about it, I'm fixing it. But it's the resisting that's creating the problem. It's not solving any problems, it's creating the problems. And then just getting us stuck in this endless circle of pushing back on something that we're not doing anything about, that often there's nothing to do. So we have to see it. It's not enough to just hear it. We have to say the mantra repeatedly in our meditation, to go out into our day and see how we keep resisting and break ourselves out of the pattern, to see that that freedom on the other side when you recognize, oh my God, I was the one creating my suffering. No one else, just me. And I know that the argument that a lot of people have to this is, well, if I don't ever resist, I'm just going to be a doormat and everyone's going to walk all over me and, life's going to be miserable. And it is the most hilarious argument, because for the amount of resisting that we do, to expect that we are going to make this complete 180 and not resist anything is just unrealistic. It's not going to happen. If it did, you'd be the happiest doormat in the world, but it's not going to happen. And I don't mean, I'm not advocating for us to become doormats either. There is some balance to this, because sometimes there is something to be done. Sometimes there is something to be said. If you're on hold with customer service and you've been on hold for 2 hours and you keep getting passed around, and while you still don't want to get in that mind movement of resisting, you might need to say something to be a little bit more effective in getting you eventually off the phone. And I've said this many times before. I mean, my kind of go-to line is, because a couple times a year, at least 2 or 3 times a year, we all have that 2-hour call with customer service, whether it's our cell phone, our internet provider, or cable, whatever it is, we all have that experience a couple times a year. And we're all there for a few hours. And, we usually are resisting a lot by that moment. Usually we're resisting in the first 20 minutes. And I'll just say to them, like, look, I am not upset with you. I know this is not your fault, but I am nearing the end of my tether and I really need to get this resolved. So I think we need to get a manager involved here, because I'm at the end of my tether. No, I am not really at the end of my tether, but I recognize I need to say something in order to get the ball rolling, because otherwise I'm just going to keep getting passed around. But I also want this person to be my advocate as well. I don't want to be resisting to them, yelling at them. And if we're resisting in our mind, oh my God, if I get passed on to one more person, I don't get this resolved, I'm going to lose it. That's what we tell ourselves. And then we lose it on the person. And how likely are they to want to help us at that moment? We want to make sure that when we need to speak up, that we do speak up, but in a way that helps us move forward, not make us, not push us back. And if it's something like your flight's delayed or your flight's canceled, I mean, if you have nothing to do that day or the next day, and it's not a big deal, like, okay, it's not a big deal, just nothing to do, just, hey, change of plans. But if if you've got the heart that's ready for the heart transplant, you got to get there, you've got a speaking engagement, it's your wedding or something, like, yeah, you got to get there. Of course, you're going to look for other flights. You're going to ask the person, the gate person, for some help. But to keep in mind as well, like, when we're resisting, oh my God, this shouldn't be happening, this is such an atrocity that this is happening, those thoughts engage the stress response. When we're stressed, we lose our prefrontal cortex. We lose 10 to 15 IQ points immediately. That is not an insignificant amount of IQ points. We are not our most intelligent at that moment. We can't think rationally. We can't solve complex problems. So for the challenges that we face today, this resisting is not helping us get what we need to get done. But 99% of the stuff, 99% of what we're resisting, there really is nothing to do. We're simply just pushing back in our thoughts. We are creating problems where no problems exist. And we are suffering because of it. It makes us unhappy. And once those thoughts, those complaining thoughts, leave our mind and we start sharing them with everyone around us, we make them unhappy too. So peace is not resisting, not just for us, for everyone else around us. And resisting is very, very sneaky, just like chasing, like we looked at last week. Many, many disguises it wears to come in different back doors. And so I want to share two personal stories of resisting that both had really good outcomes and have turned into really good lessons that I've been sharing for years. So the first story was and this is almost 10 years ago, I was camping up in Northern California, and I was just getting ready for my afternoon meditation. So I'm in my camper van, and I always do some stretching beforehand just to prepare my body to sit. And as I'm doing my stretching, I hear my neighbor turning on some music. And I'm kind of like a little resisting going on. And it gets really loud. It's Led Zeppelin, and they are just playing it super, super loud. And I'm thinking, well, maybe they're going to adjust it back down. And no, it just stays up pretty loud. And my mind is immediately pushing back and resisting because I'm about to meditate. And the whole park should be quiet this hour, right? No one should be partying. No one should be celebrating. This is a quiet park, right? So these are all the thoughts I'm pushing back on. I mean, what kind of rude people would do this, would play the music so loud? And I decide in that moment, okay, I'm not even going to meditate. Like, there is just no point of meditating. I'm going to be too distracted. And while I decided I wasn't going to meditate, I didn't decide to stop resisting. I kept persisting with these thoughts. I kept stewing about it, kept telling myself how my neighbors were psychopaths, because who would do this? It's so rude. It's so horrible. And so I'm telling myself all these stories about how horrible my neighbors are, who are very nice people, by the way. But in that moment, I hated them. And so I realized, I'm like, well, I'm still unhappy. Like, I'm not meditating, but I'm still unhappy. I'm not letting this go. And then, like these things do, you do years of practice, years of meditating, or months of meditating and practice and listening to teachings. All of a sudden, a story came through that I had heard in the past. And it was from this great master talking about he was out meditating and the village was playing music and how he was so irritated. And I realized, I'm like, it's not the music that's the problem. It's what I'm telling myself. This is far more distracting and annoying than the music that they're playing. And in that moment, I decided, okay, I am going to sit and meditate, but I'm going to be crystal clear about what the disturbance is. It's not the music. It's what I'm telling myself about why they shouldn't be doing it, why the resisting to the music. And as I sat to meditate, because I was so on the lookout for what the real disturbance was, anytime one of those little thoughts started to creep up, they shouldn't be, I would see it, or, this is so rude. I would see it and I would just drop it like a hot potato. I'm not even going anywhere near that. And I stayed just on my concentration, on my breath. And by the time the bell went an hour later, I couldn't believe that. I'm like, oh my gosh, it was such a deeply peaceful, tranquil, centered meditation. And even after the meditation, I'm like, oh, and the music's still playing. Okay, it wasn't really a problem at all. And after that, I went for a walk because this was a big deal for me. Up until then, I had always thought, oh, everything's got to be perfect for my meditation. The irony on me is not lost on that. I've got to meditate and try and get everything perfect for it. And I went for a walk because I thought this really was it was a pretty profound insight for me at that stage. And what I realized that was so powerful about it was that I really did know what the disturbance was going to be ahead of time. I would be triggered by the music and then immediately into the story. And what I decided to come up with was my top 10 playlist of of my most annoying thoughts. Because the problem for us is that we don't know what our next thought is going to be. None of us knows. Even though they are recurring themes, and we are really just rehashing the same thoughts day after day, they're still mixed up in enough of a kind of a raffle that we keep getting caught off guard. So I wrote down my top 10 playlist, and just all the thoughts. I'm trying to think of what was annoying me yesterday, and what was annoying me 3 days ago, and what was annoying me last week, and just to get them all down. And as I wrote them down, I also categorized them between chasing thoughts and resisting thoughts to get an idea, like, where is my mind mostly? And it was mostly, as I was looking at it, like 9 out of 10 thoughts were resisting thoughts. And I thought, wow, I spend a lot of time in aversion mode. Like, that's crazy. I wouldn't have thought it was that much. And what I also, as I'm looking down, I'm like, oh, here's a difficult person thought. And, oh, here's another difficult person thought. Oh no, here's another one. And then I thought, oh no, I'm the difficult person, not them, it's me. Like, it was just so obvious. I'm like, oh my God, because it can't be all these people are the problem. I must be the problem. And it really was just enlightening, like, to look at it that way, and to look at it at a time when I wasn't caught up in the thoughts. So I wasn't in the resisting. I could see the thoughts more clearly. And I could very clearly see, I saw themes, the names would change, the themes were definitely there. So then I would just compact it down to a theme. Like, okay, we can take out all these individual instances. There is a clear theme for this thought. And what I saw for everyone, I'm like, every one of those thoughts leads to suffering. Not one of those thoughts ever gets resolved. There's never an answer. There's never a solution. The thought is the problem. And then I would look at it every few days, just review it, so that I could be more prepared. And then when one of those thoughts would arise, or something within one of those themes, it was just so easy to look at it like it was the thought about the music and go, oh, you're top 10. You're top 10. I'm not touching you. And then maybe sometimes the thought would keep coming back, and I would then make a little joke out of it, and I'd be like, and with a bullet to number 1, here is, this person shouldn't be bothering me. So, and I would kind of laugh about the ridiculousness of these thoughts. But it really did help me to be prepared for the thoughts. And we do need to be prepared. So I do encourage, and I know some of you have done it before, Libby and Kimberly and Sophie, I think you guys have, and Jackie, you guys have done this before. But do it again. Go back and write down your top 10 playlist. And see where you fall on the chasing versus the resisting side. So you'll know which mantra you need to focus on more. We do both. We do chasing and we do resisting. I think in my 20s, they would have all been chasing thoughts, desire thoughts, right? My teens and my 20s. And so maybe there's something to do with old age in that all of a sudden we go into aversion thoughts. But it is interesting for us to see, like, where is your mind going the most? And if you know you're going mostly to resisting thoughts, or you're going to mostly chasing thoughts, then you know you need to focus a little bit more on that mantra. And that can be helpful, because the more you say those mantras in the meditation, when you're going about your day, it sticks in the forefront of your mind. And all of a sudden you're doing it, and the thought just pops there, and you go, here it is. Oh my God, I'm doing it right now. And when we know what the problem is, when we get pointed in the right direction, because of course the resisting, we're pointing outwards. They're the problem. It's always they're the problem. They're never the problem. I'm the problem. I'm resisting. And if we can acknowledge that and we can see what's really going on, and then do the mantra, as we're saying the mantra and breathing, we let go of the resisting in the story, and we come back into the present moment, and it's like, more evidence. Yeah, I was miserable a minute ago when I was resisting, or I was just even slightly irritated. And now I feel pretty good because I let go of the resistance. And now I'm really seeing that belief that if I don't get what I don't want, if I get what I don't want, I have to be miserable. That's not true. That's not true at all. It's just that peace is not resisting. We need to see this for ourselves. I have one more story, and this is from a retreat, a month-long meditation retreat I did in Nepal in 2016. And this was a pretty difficult retreat. It's not like a retreat where you're with a group of people and you're going to talks every day, and you're going to meditate together, and you kind of have this whole group dynamic going on. This was a private retreat where I was by myself in a room, meant to just do my meditation and my study in the room. I could go up to the dining hall for meals. I would meet with a nun once a week just to talk about what I was doing, my practice. But that was it. I was on my own. So all of us that were doing private retreats were in this kind of separate house, a little bit away from the main activity of the monastery. And you have to apply to do retreats like this. You have to list everything you've done. You have to make a case that you're not going to go insane doing one of these retreats, because they're super intense. And I'm there, and I'm on about day 5 or day 6 of the retreat. It's going pretty well. And I've just finished my morning sitting, and I'm doing some yoga, and I'm stretching before going up to the dining hall. And my mind starts wandering. Of course, we know what happens when our minds start wandering, and it starts out good. That doesn't matter. And it started out with, I'm on day 6. And wow, I'm doing pretty good. Like, I've got my schedule, I've got my rhythm, I'm not freaking out. Like, yeah, you know what? I got this in the bag. I'm going to skate through this. I'm doing well. And then the next thought goes, well, hang on a minute. There's 31 days in August. So, because actually that's what I was telling myself. I'm like, you've got 24 days left. Like, yeah, you got this. And then I'm like, no. There's 31 days in August. So you've got 27 days. I'm like, okay, 27 days. And I'm like, well, I really shouldn't count today because it's still morning. So, okay, so I've got 28 days. And then I'm realizing, like, oh my God, though, I'm leaving September 2nd. I've got 2 more days, so now I've got 29 days. And in that, literally what took probably 30 seconds of thought, I went from, I got this, I'm doing great, to, oh my God, I can't do this retreat. This is way too much time. I did not realize the enormity of it. I was panicked. My heart was beating rapidly. I was sweating. I was really terrified in that moment, and literally switched that fast of how am I going to handle the enormity of this retreat, of being in this room day after day, doing the same thing. And it was such a panic. I'm looking for an out, right? Because we're trying to fix it. I'm like, I'll go back to Kathmandu and I'll just stay there for the rest of the time. I'll go back to the hotel I was at before. I'll fly to Dubai. No one will even know I didn't do the rest of the retreat. I'll just stay away for a while. And I'm just kind of looking for this out, and I'm panicking. And again, just through practice, through study, through listening to talks, all of a sudden, and it was like these kind of almost divine words, because I've looked them up. I've never found a teacher that said these words before. I thought, I must have gotten this from someone. I can't find it. And the words came, is this moment okay? And in that moment then, I'm like, I looked around my room, looked at the bed, the tea kettle, looked outside. I could hear the birds chirping. I could hear the monkeys. There were tons of monkeys in this monastery. I could hear all these sounds and sing, and I'm like, okay, yeah, this moment's okay. The panic started dissolving. The paper tigers I was creating started, disappearing. A few more minutes go by, and I ask again, is this moment okay? Looking around, I'm hearing the sounds, I'm feeling my body, knowing where I am, smelling any smells. Yeah, this moment right now, this is okay. And I went up to the dining hall and had breakfast, and I kept just asking, checking in every now and then. I'm like, yeah, this moment's okay. And after breakfast, I decided to go sit in the stupa gardens. I did think maybe I could use a little sunshine, a little fresh air. Maybe I've been inside a little too much. And I sat there on a bench in the stupa gardens. I wasn't reading anything. I wasn't journaling. I wasn't meditating. I just sat there. And then by that point, every 10, 20, 30 minutes, I would ask, is this moment okay? And yeah, this moment's okay. Everything was good. And I sat there until lunch the following day, other than meals and going back to sleep. But I sat there for many hours, completely present, completely okay in this moment. Because what had happened was, when I was panicking, it wasn't the fear of handling the retreat in this moment. It was the fear of how am I going to handle it in the next moment. It was the enormity of it that was throwing me into that resistance mode, into that fear mode. And this is often what we do when we're experiencing something that's difficult. It's not that we can't handle it in this moment. We are fearing the enormity of it. And that is what overwhelms us and where we resist and push back on it. I mean, even just little things like I'm bored, right? We freak out when we're bored, as though it's, how am I? And I can handle it in this moment, but what if I'm bored in the next moment? How will I handle that? But we ask ourselves just these 4 simple words. Is this moment okay? Look around. Hear. If you're eating, taste your food. Touch, whatever you're touching. Smell. Using your senses to ground you back into the moment. Validating that peace is not resisting. So it's another teaching for us to remind us how to come back into the present moment. And by the way, and for those of you that did ask for the mindfulness bracelets, you are getting this one as well. And anyone that does want them, one of the mindfulness bracelets says, is this moment okay? To remind us. And this is one of the most, I get the most positive feedback on this, that people will years later that have seen this teaching, because I've been giving this teaching since that, right after that retreat, I was teaching in La Ventana. Oh, there's no one here from Mexico right now, but I was giving that talk. Well, Jackie, in fact, I gave that talk the next summer in San Diego. So since 2017 for Jackie, I've been giving this talk, and I get the most feedback that people find this such a simple way to bring them back into the present moment. Is this moment okay? Don't worry about the next moment. Don't worry about the last moment. This moment. Is this moment okay? So we have the mantra, peace is not resisting. We're going to do that in a moment. The meditation. We've got our top 10 playlist to really be prepared for what the problem is, to do it in advance. Take the time now. Save yourself hours, days, weeks of frustration, and take the time now to write down those thoughts, to be more familiar, more prepared for them. And then asking ourselves as well, is this moment okay? That all of these tools can help us notice not just the resisting mind, because you might find on your top 10 playlist, you might find there's some chasing thoughts on there as well. These are the 2 main mind movements, by the way. Chasing, resisting, wanting, not wanting, desire, aversion. These are the 2 mind movements that pull, the 2 mind moves that keep pulling us out of the present moment continuously. We have our foot on the accelerator. I want. And then we're resisting. And we're doing this all day long. We are constantly thinking our happiness is over there or pushing away something that we think is infringing on our happiness, and thereby not living in the present moment. And if this were making us happy, okay, no problem. But it's not. It's making us miserable. And it's not adding anything. It's not giving any perceivable benefit to anyone whatsoever. So we have the practices. We need to use the practices. Do the meditations. And I will, just for Michelle's benefit, I will, because have you seen last week's class by chance, Michelle? Okay. So I just want to give her, and we can have a little review for everyone. I'll just take 1 minute. When we go through the meditation, and I'll guide us through the meditation, but we will get to a point where we'll bring in the mantra, and you're going to count the mantra on your hand. And this is a good review for everyone as well, just to count how to count. So with your left hand, unless there's any medical reasons not to use your left hand, bring the top of your thumb and the top of your pinky together. This is the first count. And we say silently to ourselves, peace is not resisting. And then we go to the middle of the finger, peace is not resisting. And then the crease, peace is not resisting. And then we just go to the top of the next finger, the middle, the crease, the top of the next finger, the middle, the crease, top of the next finger, the middle, the crease, and then we come back to the pinky and just start again, the middle, the crease, and just keep working our way down. It's one full inhale and exhale for each mantra, for each count. And the counting is just an additional aid to help anchor our minds. And also because, and just as a reminder, everyone, it brings in part of our motor cortex. So we're using another part of our brain. And the more neural networks that we can get in on this, that peace is not resisting, the more likely we are to remember. It really does happen. You'll be standing in line and all of a sudden just, peace is not resisting. Oh, your peace is, oh yeah. And you're doing it. It's just, it becomes like this second nature as the practice, you start doing it, and it pulls you out of that trance of resisting or chasing. And of course, we're also going to get into comparing and judging and narrating, which are all under these same umbrellas. Judging, resisting, whether I'm judging someone else or myself. Comparing, I'm resisting and probably desiring. I'm not wanting this, I'm wanting something else. And narrating has that little bit of resisting. It's just a little bit of resisting as we're going about our day, narrating everything. It actually just creates a little bit of resistance to experiencing what's happening in the moment. Everything we do, every type of self-referential thinking that we do falls under this. Complaining, right? I'm resisting. I'm controlling something. I'm resisting. I'm attached to my views and opinions. I'm resisting you having a different view and opinion, right? Whatever it is, it falls under chasing or resisting. They always fall under that. So it's good for us to have these, the main umbrella, to know what these two mind movements are. This is the ego, by the way. I want, I don't want. This is the problem. And we are identifying the problem and we are rooting it out. Really seeing the belief that's been holding us to it and seeing this for yourself. It's not just because I'm saying it. You won't change just because I've said it. You'll change because you'll see for yourself that peace is not resisting.